Now, this is such a brave book, Rashna, and a manual for anyone who faces psychological blockages that prevent finding his or her authentic self. Your previous book dealt with love and relationships, but this has a more social context. What concerns prompted it?
Well, to begin with, I had come back from Switzerland and I was a Jungian. I hadn't studied psychology in India, so I came across a lot of marriages which came for counseling. One was gay and the other wasn't. And I saw that they were forced to be married by their parents. And it was like a social drama just for society. And I saw the suffering behind it. And I just thought, it was, for instance, some cases, they waited till their parents died until they came out and declared their identity. And I thought it's such a useless life. I mean, what kind of a life is that we're living for society and not for ourselves? So I thought for the next generation, I hope that doesn't happen. And this book is for the new generation, that please don't do what I have seen in the past, and to give them the courage to really come out and have the, no more secrecy. It has to be now. The time has come. And basically, I waited very much for the marriage laws to come out. I was in Switzerland. I listened to them quite earnestly online, went on for days. And at some point, I thought it would pass. But then when it didn't, I gave a different ending to the book, which I hope people who read it will have the courage to be themselves and, go ahead with their relationships. So this is really for the next generation. I really hope that they don't have to go through all that I have seen behind closed doors in my therapy room.
Yes, it seems very odd that, having rescinded 377 of the IPC, they then decide to go ahead and say, yes, we recognize gay relationships, but we refuse to recognize gay marriages. And I think this was a big, spur for Rashna to write the book as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we're going to read from the book. I'm going to read as, Rashna will read as herself, the analyst, and I will read as Amit.
Yeah.
Conversation between the mentor, the psychoanalyst, and Amit. The journey to individuation means killing the parent dragon and finding one's own voice.
So, me as the analyst says, how can I help you? What's troubling you that you seek my help?
I've never had any close relationships. I've always been a loner. In school, too, I was never able to form any close relationships. I love reading and I hate sports. Due to the lack of exercise, I put on weight. So the doctor suggested that I see a therapist. I hate my body and I can't seem to lose any weight.
You may just happen to be an introvert and enjoy your own company. There's nothing wrong in that. Many children don't know the reason for the excess weight. But fat can also be an armor to protect a young person from being hurt. There may be deeper reasons why you hate your body.
What do you mean by deeper reasons?
Well, while you were growing up, what were the kind of friendships you had? Were they with boys or with girls?
I had very few friendships. I used to prefer reading rather than playing football or cricket. I grew up with one friend who was the daughter of my parents' best friends, but she's like a sister. She's close, but in a fraternal way. I've never had a romantic relationship with anyone so far, and I do not feel any romantic inclinations towards her either.
I would like to ask you to close your eyes and ask you to think about people you may have admired while you were growing up? Persons whom you felt you had a kind of passion to be friends with, or people who you may have admired?
Of course, I had plenty of people who I fantasized about, but they were always people who I was sure would never be interested in me.
In your fantasy, were they male or female?
Well, as a boy, I had no chance to know many females except this one sister like person that I grew up with. Most of the people I grew up with were boys. I was in a boys' school, so it was mainly boys I fantasized about. But they were not the ones I interacted with daily. These remained shadow figures in my mind.
Amit, I would like to ask you one question. What do you think about homosexuality and romantic relationships between persons of the same sex?
Well, I think it is a crime. And I've grown up in a boys' school where they made fun of boys who we all called pansies. So I began to hate such people too.
Amit, has it ever occurred to you that you grew up in an atmosphere where you were conditioned to be homophobic?
Oh my God, you seem to have touched something very deep. I never realized that I hated homos and used to look down upon them and judge them. But I may be one myself, and yet I would hate to discover that I am.
Why do you hate them? What's wrong in loving someone who's of the same sex?
Well, firstly, until recently, it was against the law in our country. I know this has changed now after the Supreme Court has scrapped Article 377 of the Indian Penal Code. However, people still look down on homosexuals and do not respect those who have come out openly. In school, we used to call them queer. This is not going to change just because a law has been scrapped recently.
I would like now for you to consider this question. Who has made these laws in the first place? Were they made by man or were they made by God? And which God made those laws? And if such laws are man-made, how come human beings play God and forbid something that nature has given us, namely the inclination to love a person of the same sex?
But then those who have come out today are still looked down upon.
In whose eyes?
In the eyes of my parents and relatives, for instance, and all the people whom I knew and grew up with in school, the teachers, the students, and the friends I have made since.
Amit, are you aware that there are many countries in which these negative attitudes have changed after the archaic laws were removed? In our country too, our collective conditioning will make place for acceptance in due time. But be that as it may, I think we have covered enough for today. We've touched upon a key issue, and I will take it up later. In the meantime, I would like you to consider why you hate your body. Why have you grown so much fat around yourself? Is it perhaps to protect yourself? I would like to leave you with one question to consider till we meet next time. Did any God forbid anyone from loving another human being? Is love not a universal energy that comes of itself?
Does that mean that you are not against homosexuality or two people who love each other belonging to the same sex?
I am for nature and the way God made each individual. Each is born as a seed that becomes the unique individual, unique tree that was meant to become. But we shall talk about that in detail in our next session. In the meantime, I'm going to give you some homework to read up, which may pertain to your present state of depression. I would like you to think about these issues and see if they relate to what is happening to you in your life right now.
So the next section is a sort of summation of this session with the analyst. Crossing the first threshold. What is the meaning of individuation? In Jungian psychology, the journeys of heroes and heroines in fairy tales and myths are studied, as they often symbolize basic human traits and inclinations called archetypes. Individuation is one such core process in analysis, answering the question, How does one become true to oneself? Myths and tales throw light on the obstacles to personal development by studying the process of individuation in the light of mythical journeys of heroes and heroines. Rather than persons, they stand for patterns of behavior and thinking. Thus, gods, goddesses, and demons represent certain constants of the unconscious psyche, ways in which the emotional and imaginative elements of the personality behave. These are archetypes of the unconscious, and when an archetype is awakened, it triggers a certain behavior. Archetypes have always existed before we were born, and will exist after we die. One has to identify which archetype is operating within us at a given moment and which is still unconscious. Myths bring out in story form how the suppressed tendencies of individuals take on recognizable archetypal behavior patterns when suppressed by familial and cultural edicts. I think you need to give us a concrete example of a popular folk tale or well known story of the hero myth where individuation is pursued and found. I think it would be very helpful to present this abstract concept in more concrete terms for an audience understanding.
Yeah. My answer to that would be the story of Cinderella, for instance. Everybody knows the story of Cinderella. So if we look at Cinderella in the Jungian lens, it's a story about individuation. The journey to become true to one's inner self. Cinderella starts her journey as a rejected, unseen stepchild. This represents our unseen, this stepchild, which represents neglected or suppressed self in us. The step family embodies the shadow, the false identities we adapt to in order to survive. The fairy godmother appears as the inner guiding force that awakens when we are ready to grow. The royal ball that she goes to is her emergence into fuller consciousness, allowing her inner self to be seen by the outer world. And the glass slipper that she loses symbolizes something essential. Individuation means becoming the person you can truly fit one's own shoe. It is ultimately a story of reclaiming one's innate worth and stepping into wholeness. That is when her male prince finally finds her. Now, Joseph Campbell, who was also a Jungian, he wrote a fantastic book, which is a book, if anybody reads it, you understand myths, because he wrote cross-cultural mythology, and he took the hero's journey from different cultures. And he actually made a map showing individuation, the different stages of consciousness. And each stage you have to step into a different stage. And in fact, if you all are interested, anybody wants to, because many films were also made on the hero's journey, showing how individuation happens. And Hollywood had taken it up after Joseph Campbell's book came out and so on. But the most important thing is to see that if you're interested, you can look at it online, any Google thing of the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell. There's a whole circle showing different stages of consciousness. So individuation is finding your own voice and not the voice that is imposed onto Cinderella, like she thought she's that stepchild and believed what she was allowed to believe, but coming into her own and finding the Prince Charming in her life, which allows her to heal and find herself.
Since you now incorporate Indian myths and systems, who have you considered as archetypes. Have you ever considered the Vishnu avatars as any of the archetypes?
Well, I have written this book basically because I always wanted to include Jung's idea of individuation through the chakra system, because he had separated from Freud and he was actually sort of isolated for a long time. And he had started his own process of trying to find out stages of consciousness, because he just could not see eye to eye with Freud's interpretation anymore. And in 1942, there was a professor from Germany, Professor Hauer, who came, and he gave a series of 4 lectures called the Sat Chakra Nirupama, the 7 chakras. And Jung was just blown away by that, because he felt that, my God, he's talking about the stages of consciousness that one moves through. And in fact, he incorporated it and gave a series of lectures himself, how individuation takes certain stages in one's life and incorporated it into the chakra system. Now, I always wanted to write a book incorporating this. So what I did was I took one person who is gay and one person who is not, but who also has a problem, so that I used case histories. This is not, of course, one case history or 2 case histories. There are case histories which I have actually dealt with and put them through the chakras to show how one can find one inner self to reach that center of self. And so it is fictional in a way where I have used case histories. It's not the same persons. I just wanted to make that clear. I had finished the book, and I did not have the myth at all. And Jung had a very strange dream of a person with a scarab on the hand. And it's supposed to bring good luck. And I was sitting in Switzerland in my chalet, and there was a scarab on my hand. And I told my client, I wonder, the book is finished. What does this mean to me? And that seemed, I thought, okay, I've finished the book, so maybe I'm going to get a good publisher or something like that. But on the very same day, I must finish the story about the scarab, because it was a patient who had dreamt about the scarab, and she wasn't really into her dream and it wasn't going well. And Jung said, but it's a very important dream because it's bringing good luck. And she said, yeah, it may be, it may be in another mythology, but doesn't mean anything to me. And at that moment, he felt something on the window, and he just took his intuition, picked up that, and he said, was this in your dream? And it was a scarab. And her dreams changed after that, because she found it such an incredible synchronicity. So I also thought, well, maybe he's going to bring good luck. Now, on the very same day, I was doing therapy with that person who was with me, and I had put on Carnatic music on the radio to calm her down. And one music stopped, and before the next one started, I hear the story of Shiva and Mohini. Anybody knows who Mohini is? Put up your hands. How many people know who? Okay. So I didn't know. And I was so fascinated, and of course, I had to include that myth into my chapter, because I found it absolutely fascinating how Indian mythology is so open, it's so inclusive, it's showing nature the way we are. And my book would not have been complete without that story. So I also would like to show you what happened. In fact, I had never seen a picture of Mohini and Shiva. It's the whole story of the Samudra Manthan, and it's the churning of the ocean. And the whole Jungian understanding is so beautifully experienced through this story, because it's Shiva who goes off with Mohini, and this is Parvati who doesn't even want to look at what's happening. And it's her thing, her Nandi also looking away. And if you see all the animals here, they're also all making love, like these two are up there. So it's a beautiful understanding of nature, how we are. The Samudra Manthan, which is the confrontation with one's own personal shadow, where the union of Shiva and Mohini give birth to a new hero, Ayappan, who teaches us that wholeness comes not from exclusion, but from integration. That is the courage to be human, holding the symbolic field together. The myth of this land were never meant to divide us. They were meant to help us to hold complexity of life within ourselves and with one another.
May I just intervene? Isn't it ironic that Ayappan, who was a product of Shiva and Mohini, now prevents women from going to the temple? I mean, it's just one of these, contradictions that have come up in modern India.
Yeah.
We claim to be one thing, and yet we practice another thing.
It's even in the papers today. Yes, they're going to repeal the law again. Shiva and Mohini myth is very much about gender fluidity without collapsing into modern identity politics. Shiva is here seen as a transformative consciousness. He's seen as a destroyer, at the same time a psychic renewal. Mohini is the archetype of seduction, as Maya, the unconscious intelligence. She symbolizes the archetypal eros, which can destabilize any rigid identity, either male or female. Mohini represents what our consciousness cannot control. Ayappan is seen as the divine child or the hero archetype. He is born out of two male gods and is not heteronormative creation. He is raised by a king during his ego formation years and is sent on an impossible task. That is his initiation. He instead chooses renunciation over kingship. This shows that his ego has transcended and is not inflated. The important fact remains that Ayappa does not leave the world after his enlightenment. He is not the hero who escapes samsara. He is the hero who stays behind to hold it. This places him closer to the bodhisattva archetype than a conquering king.
Sanatana Dharma has so many tools that psychology uses today because its aim is the same as individuation, to integrate, to transcend. So Hinduism has its own systematic processes of individuation in yoga and tantra disciplines. Yoga Nidra, Antramauna, the concept of Sakshi, the witness. How many of these have you resorted to?
Well, in Jungian psychology, we look at when dreams come up with something that we call the higher self or the Atman consciousness. And that happened when Jung had one of these. He used to record all his dreams and in fact paint them. And he had this amazing dream of something called Philemon. And Philemon was this winged being which came to him. And he found that he used to have conversations with him in the morning when he used to have his walks on the Lake of Zurich. And he said, Philemon gave me insight which was other than my ego consciousness, to something different. And so many years later, Gandhiji's friend came to see Jung, and Jung asked him, do you have a guru by any chance? And he said, yeah, I have Shankaracharya. So he said, do you mean Shankaracharya who wrote the Vedas many centuries ago? He said, yes, I speak to him. So Jung said, oh my God, like I speak to Philemon, he speaks to this imaginal figure who is his Atman consciousness or a different kind of consciousness. So what we try to do in therapy also is to invoke through their dreams or through active imagination to have this part of ourself become more stable in us, to become stronger so that we don't get caught in our ego, sort of chittas that bother us on a day-to-day basis. When we speak to that part of ourself, it gives us different answers. So that's the way we use this kind of, it's a kind of, he came upon it also through the chakras, that the more you transcend the chakras by clearing the shadow side, I think it's important we talk about that, because each chakra also has a shadow side within us. What is the shadow side? For instance, that, you don't talk about if the boy was gay, for instance, Amit. He was not able to talk about it. He kept it secret because he knew that the parents don't agree and other people don't. So your behavior goes into the shadow. And so each chakra has its own shadow side where we are scared to be ourselves and we don't talk about that which really matters to us. So how do we clear that? Every chakra has a different level of consciousness.
And it's amazing that, everyone talks about psychosomosis, how important the body is linked to the mind. And here, Jung, of course, deals with psychology, but the chakra deals with the body. But it has the same stages. And, you talk about how you can release the same shadows in the chakra as a physical thing, as well as, it has an effect on the mind. When you work on the body, you release the mind, and vice versa.
So basically, the second person who we talk about is the girl in the couple who are forced to get married. And the way we deal with the girl's side, she has been violated by her grandfather when she was young. And the grandfather unknowingly, because he had lost his wife, he was put into the child's room. And he had violated her and kept her in secrecy for many years. And her grandfather had died. This is a true story which I have put into the... And when she realized later on, when she was older, much older, the first sexual encounter that she had, her body went into deep freeze because something had closed within her as a child when she was violated. Now, that's the second chakra which was violated. But when she actually fell in love with somebody and wanted a closer relationship, her body was reacting in a very strange way. This is how we find out how, chakras are blocked, and then you go and work with that part of the body. Now, there are many ways where that is, it doesn't necessarily mean it's only violation that happens. It can happen otherwise also. But how do we deal with this is what we explain also in the homework that we do through the book. Each chapter has a homework. How do you deal with that? Would you like me to talk a little bit more about this? About the limbic part? Yeah.
Your book is a manual, a roadmap of Jungian concepts rooted in Indian realities, which I'm sure will help the layperson better understand the problems of your characters. It also invites the reader to investigate his own psychological fissures. Hopefully, the reader can relate to the healing, which is both cognitive but simultaneously spiritual. But realistically, is it possible to apply what your guidelines to one's own personal problems? Can one heal a deep-seated trauma on one's own by following the guidelines in your book? One can perhaps progress on the path to individuation with it, but for deeper psychological problems, is it fair to say that another person is necessary? Someone with enough professional competence to be objective, either the therapist or guru, or even in the Catholic tradition, a priest confessor.
See, when a child is violated, the body stores the memory in the survival circuits. It's not logical. It's the limbic system, and it controls the emotions and the part that controls flight and fright. For instance, when you see a snake and you suddenly go like that, it's the limbic system, it's not our. So later, the rational brain may know that they are safe, but the limbic brain may still react as if the danger is still present. Healing must therefore include the body, not just the narrative. Now, to answer your question about the deep-seated trauma, it needs a lot of inner work for that recovery to happen. It can sometimes cause what is known as vaginismus. It's not always the case, but such a trigger can have such responses. The reason being is that the limbic part of the brain is between our ears, it's the lower brain. It triggers off a threat to the body. When there's a body trauma, for instance, when a child is molested, that part of the brain shuts down in order to survive. Later in life, this part takes time to open up, against which takes time and patience. Definitely needs a therapist, or a patient lover can also help, who can heal such early trauma. It's also the part of the brain which is not connected to the rational thinking brain. And there are very many new therapies today like EMDR, which is eye movement therapy, or brain spotting is supposed to be really good for this kind of thing, or somatic experiencing, sensory motor therapy. The goal is restoring the autonomic flexibility rather than the cognitive reframing of which goes on. Vaginismus is perhaps rather intimate medical term, and I'm sure those interested can Google it, but I think it's very important to explain it to the audience so that,
I can hardly pronounce it, so I don't know if people will remember it to Google it, but it's such an important concept, Rashna, that I think you should understand how the body reacts when it is assaulted or traumatized. So would you mind explaining it? further?
It's this part of the brain, which is the limbic system, closes down. And it doesn't know it's closed down because it's not in the rational mind. And therefore, later on, when such close contact comes up, the body has reacted and closed because it has survived. And it doesn't know another way. So it is through these different methodologies that we have learned through brain spotting and EMDR, which help to connect the mind-body system, which seems to work. Or, of course, a very, in the book, I've used a very helpful lover who is able to help her gently find her healing. It's also possible.
But I'm sorry, I'm going to push you on this. But vaginismus is actually the closing up of the vagina.
Yeah.
That is a reaction that is caused by trauma.
Early trauma. Because it's survival.
That's another, but it's amazing that the body itself is capable of such reaction.
Yeah, but it has to survive.
Down, but the body also.
The body is
survival technique. And you said that is extremely difficult to work through.
But it is absolutely possible to heal. But it takes time, and there are new therapies which are helping. Or a very careful lover who is able to slowly, help them to have confidence to open up.
Can we discuss the third gender as mentioned in Hinduism? It may come as a surprise to many here, a fact that you have mentioned in the book, that Richard Burton, nothing to do with Liz Taylor, but Orientalist Richard Burton, who came to India, he was in the Middle East, he even wrote a book on Goa. He deleted homosexuality from his translation of the Kama Sutra, and it has yet to be fully restored on a par with other subjects discussed in that work. What else have you found for example, if there are any sculptural representations of homosexuality in temple carvings?
Yeah, in fact, there's a very strange story which happened many years ago when the Khajuraho temples were discovered during the British time. Gandhiji wrote an article in the newspapers saying that it's a very decadent period of Hinduism. And Rabindranath Tagore wrote again in the paper to say, Gandhiji, please inform yourself better. And in fact, Gandhiji replies after informing himself and apologizes. Those were the kind of leaders we had. Because it shows, how informative our old mythology was. And we went through periods where, we had different people who were here ruling us. And so we took on the kind of, Victorian behavior and we started to be conditioned through that, and we lost our own culture. So it's really important to see how humanistic our myths and our sculptures, and we're talking about life, So we need to go back to our life. So I was really moved to find this, and in fact, this painting which we just showed you of Mohini and Shiva is again something that I found when I went to the Kochi Biennale in December. I had never heard of Mohini and Shiva, and all of a sudden, when I was talking to an artist, he said, yes, I've restored something in the Kochi palace. I'll show it to you. But it's still hidden. It's not shown to the public. Because he restored it, you can see it very beautifully now, what was on the thing. But before that, it was open. But now, since it's restored, they've closed it. why are we doing this? I don't understand. And day before yesterday, I was in Hyderabad. I went to a temple, Rama something temple, and there's Mohini and Shiva again. The whole myth was on the carving again. I'm suddenly finding these stories which are appearing for me. So I find it fascinating. It's the whole story, and all the archetypes are part of the chapter in the book. We can't go into the detail of it.
Yes, but if anybody else knows of any, this is something I've never been able to ascertain, whether there are any depictions of homosexuality in any of our art, or murals or temple sculpture or anything. So if anyone comes across anything, I'd love to know about it. In the meantime, I've come across the third gender mentioned in a very interesting book from which I would like to read. It's called Devadasi. A mother finds that her son is gay. She lives in a small little temple town, and she just cannot accept the fact, though her husband is very laid back about it. And he said, "Why are you getting so bothered about it? Don't we even accept our Lord Shiva himself as Ardhanarishvara?" So she runs off to the temple guru and says, uh, you know, can this be true? Is my son really, is there such a thing as gay? So he says, yes, why do you worry so much about it? It's even sanctioned in our Shastras. The body is just Jivatma, a vehicle of the spirit to carry us to God, to unite us with Paramatma. So we have to accept anybody's svabhav, one's intrinsic nature, accept deviancies that harm others. So she says, Chi, enna Gurugal, what are you saying? So he says, you should understand that Kumara is a woman in his looks and movement, not only when he is, acting on stage, but in life he thinks and feels like a woman. That is what is more important, what the individual identifies as in himself. And he says, you think this is something new, but it's sanctioned by the Shastras. For example, in the Mahabharata, Arvan was Arjuna's son, and he agreed to sacrifice himself on the battlefield before the battle. But dead bachelors couldn't be cremated. So no one would marry that poor sod Arvan, because no woman wanted to become a widow. So Krishna took pity on him and took a female form and married him just for one night. So as the next morning he would die. So this was done in Kuvagam during Chitrai. Kuvagam is a temple in Tamil Nadu. So to celebrate that wedding anniversary, till today, eunuchs dress as women and marry at that temple. All the transgenders and the cross-dressers and eunuchs go to the temple every year. So, when they can marry, it seems so stupid for the Supreme Court to prevent what has been happening since the time of the Mahabharata. Those who adopt the roles and many practices of the opposite sex are now called supernumerary gender. But centuries ago, Hindu philosophy had a category for them, Tritiya Prakriti, third nature, which they describe as an inborn nature that combines both male and female properties. Homosexuals and transgenders were recognized for their unique nature and incorporated into Vedic belief. They were not punished or persecuted under ancient Hindu law, and elaborate descriptions of homosexuality can be found in the Kama Shastra. Homosexual men are referred to in Sanskrit by several different names, including Napumsaka, Shanda, and Kliba. These words are often mistranslated into English as eunuch, but they actually refer to a wide range of men who are impotent with women for various reasons. Such men formed a distinct social class in ancient India and were considered to be sexually neutral by nature. The Sanskrit name for lesbians are Svarini or Nastriya and were similarly impotent with men. So LGBTQ, etc., are not at all uncommon in Indian mythology. For example, when Arjuna had to go into exile, he dressed as a servant, as a woman servant, and served in the court. And Shikhandi was also granted a boon to change her sex. There were no trips to Thailand in those days. So Hinduism considers universal creation as unlimitedly diverse. So the recognition of a third sex is simply one more aspect of this comprehensiveness. Gender ambiguous persons were traditionally awarded a semi-divine status, and their participation in religious ceremonies, especially as cross-dressing temple dancers, was considered auspicious, a symbol of good luck, peace, and cultural prosperity. That is why hijras are welcomed at weddings and auspicious occasions, because some still believe that people of the third sex have special powers that allow them to bless or curse others. It is a pity then that today some people who stringently reassert our cultural heritage are so selective. You know, they set themselves up as gatekeepers of society, and they persecute LGBTQs. But it's a sanctioned by Hinduism. So one doesn't need to be so selective about what we choose to believe in Hinduism, and we don't. But I must say, Hinduism deals with every form of life, and every.
It's about life.
Yes,
Yeah.
It is about life.
So the Supreme Court verdict on same-sex marriage in the Indian Express article on May 2023 declared it, that it's not allowed. So I decided to end it on a different note in my book. And I would just like to read the conclusion of my tale of the two couples who meet, because there is a beautiful temple of Shiva and Parvati in the Narbada, right in the middle of the Narbada. And Shiva and Parvati only need the North Star for their blessing, because Shiva wants Parvati to be finding her Ardhanarishwara, her other half, before he can marry her. So it's called, they need the North Star for the blessing of their wedding. So I decided, since the Supreme Court's not allowing it, both couples meet on the banks of the Narbada for a concert, and they have each found their own partner of their own choice. And they asked their parents, "Are you coming for the blessing? We want to do our blessings." And the North Star, Indians believe, comes down to planet Earth exactly in that spot where the temple is. The parents say, "No, we're not interested. It's not allowed." So they say, "Well, we are going there." So I end the book. In conclusion, I'd like to remind you of the myth of Shiva and Mohini from our own Indian tradition, which seems to have been lost through the ages of our culture, having gone through many centuries of different rules. It's important for us to look at the profound wisdom that is contained in this great myth of the god Shiva, the preserver archetype, and Vishnu, and how this wisdom finds solutions to the human conundrum. I like to end with a note from an American novelist, Bonnie Garmus. "Chemistry is change," she says. "Whenever you start doubting yourself, whether you feel afraid, just remember, courage is the root of change, and change is what we're chemically designed to do. So when you wake up tomorrow, make this pledge: no more holding yourself back, No more subscribing to others' opinions of what you can or cannot achieve. And no more allowing anyone to pigeonhole you into useless categories of sex, race, economic status, and religion. Do not allow your talents to lie dormant. Design your own future. When you go home today, ask yourself what you will change and get started. So as we come to the real beginning of the journey of these two couples, we also come to the end of this account. Both parents of the couples have come for the celebration and joined them at a concert that takes place on the banks of the Narmada River. But they are unable and unwilling to board the boat that take the couples to the island where they will take their marital vows in the temple of Shiva and Parvati. The parental generation is still caught in the collective unconscious of the present state of the laws that rule our nation. The only ones who accompany the two couples are those who have been able to transform their beliefs and who are able to move on their onward journey. Sergio, who is the man who's married the woman, along with Rajeshwari and Sergio's baby daughter, and myself as the psychoanalyst. The river connects and divides the young and the old, those taking refuge in age-old certainties and those seeking their own paths. Watched over and blessed by Shiva and Parvati, both the young couples have taken their lives into their own hands and their future being guided by the North Star on its planetary course right above their heads. They exchange their vows to each other. So I try to end it on a note which is from our tradition.
I have a question because you mentioned Rajeshwari's story about the child abuse that had happened and how that resulted in vaginismus. And I see a sort of a societal pattern as well, where we're hearing in the US of this whole cabal of the Epstein, etc. So this doesn't seem to be just an individual thing, but a collective experience as well. So I was just wondering, if we consider it in those terms, what might be the call to individuation on that kind of scale for people who have gone through that experience? And what does it speak about a kind of a does it speak to a collective wound as well?
I couldn't quite understand.
When you spoke about Rajeshwari's story
Yeah.
and how her childhood abuse
Yeah.
had also led to this vaginismus happening,
Yeah.
that's a pattern that, as I think Indian women, we see a lot in ourselves, in amongst many women, but we're also seeing it globally now in many ways. I think when I hear about things like the Epstein, what's being uncovered by what we know about the whole situation with Epstein and that kind of abuse and that wound of power, and how I'm just curious to understand if we can also think of this beyond just the individual and consider it as a kind of a collective, what is happening developmentally as well, collectively for us as we confront that. Is there a kind of a collective shift, a wounding? Is there a collective individuation in some ways happening through this, through us also expressing these wounds and seeking to heal them? Does that question make sense? I know it's a little tangled.
Wholly. You mean, can it be dealt with as a group rather than an individual?
Yes, because I think it's a collective phenomenon.
Since it's a global phenomenon.
But look what's happening. I mean, the Sabrimala case is again up. And you know, the whole thing, Ayyappan actually is a transformed being. He's a bodhisattva. And what are they bringing in that women are not allowed to go during menstruation? They're mixing up two things. Menstruation is something that women had to be separate, to take it easy, because they were, not in their best state at that time. It's nothing dirty. It's not polluting. But today, what has it turned into? It's polluting the God, which, it's so misinformed. It's, in fact, Ayyappa is the transformed being. He's the stages of different chakra levels. He has reached the highest chakra. He is the God who holds transformation. And, they're mixing up women's polluting because they have periods going into, it's so bizarre when you see the logic. But, this is the way collective beings, I know that my own mother and everybody are told, don't go into the temple and when you have your periods and stuff like that. But it's also to protect us, because in those days you don't feel so good. It's to take it easy, to not be cooking and doing other things, that you stay separate. It's got nothing to do with pollution. And, it's again come up that the court is going to change it. It's in today's papers. So we're not understanding human nature, I find. And, I don't know how long it's going to take to change, but we have to start to really try to accept, that collective consciousness takes a long time to change. How long did it take to change the sati laws? Women just used to go and burn themselves. They didn't even know they had a choice until the laws were changed. So I think slowly we will get there. But collective unconscious takes a long time when groups believe and reinforce each other.
But to further answer, go into your question, I think it's very difficult to make a wider change, and it's always better to start with the individual. Is that true?
Yeah. But for an individual to be a group psyche takes a long time. So we have to have patience till these laws change. And I'm sure the marital laws will change because other countries are changing. Even Nepal is ahead of us. Nepal has already changed it. Yeah.
Hi.
Sorry. Okay.
Hi, good evening. It was a lovely discussion. My name is Arsh. It's very interesting that you bring, science into your books at the same time on the cusp of spirituality as well. It's an intersection. I'm very interested to understand what kind of research went into the book when you were writing it. How much of your own personal experience, from therapy that you brought into it. And I'm very interested to understand that, where, according to you, the queer consciousness lies in the truth that we're trying to seek about individual selves and the truth that you also examine in other people when you're trying to be their therapist. So is there a place for queer reality to exist in your words?
When I came to India, I knew nothing about Indian mythology at all. And it was quite in the beginning where I was invited by some friends of ours who happened to be gay. They actually own the Nimrana Hotel, Francis and Aman. And they had invited a whole lot of their gay friends. And I was giving a workshop on Greek mythology, on archetypes, behavior patterns. And they were all looking at me and thinking about the archetypes. And they said, but what about the Indian ones? I knew nothing about them. And they became my first group that started giving me books on Indian mythology, which started changing my mind. And in fact, the book, this one, it's got a new cover, this one, but this was the first book I wrote where I started to compare Indian mythology and Greek mythology, because I found that Kama, for instance, was always this naughty little boy throwing arrows and causing mischief in people's lives. And then I started reading about, Eros. And then I found Kama. And Kama, same, he's also throwing arrows and causing problems into people's love life. They're flower arrows. And he even manages to disturb the great god Shiva in his meditative moments. And, you can see Shiva also here with Mohini and stuff like that. But basically, at one stage, Shiva says, enough is enough, and he burns him with his third eye. And he becomes Manmatha, becomes an image in your mind. That's all. So this transformation, and I started to compare Indian mythology with Greek mythology. That was the first book. It's now in a new format, but it was called Psychology of Love, the different stages of love. So, does that answer your question? Psychologically, I try to show how they should, there's nothing wrong there, absolutely, and that they should come out of what we do. Shadow work is what we do when parents are not accepting it, how we deal with parents. And it's not just queer. You have, even within religions, when it's not the right caste or not the right class or intercaste, you can't imagine what kids go through. They are in love because it's such a strong archetype. The heart, it can bypass anything, that love archetype. And the parents come and fight against it. It's unbelievable what they go through. And, there's so much secrecy. And we try to bring the secrecy out, that there's nothing wrong in you, You're completely normal. This is your right, So I thought this book, this new book, I had to write for the new generation.
Thank you, Rashna. Thank you, Malini, for a wonderful conversation. My question is more about, it's maybe more a literary question. When you talked about the Cinderella myth/story, what distinguishes a myth from just a story?
A myth has a behavior pattern, and Jung looked at it as, what are the stages? Do you reach that stage or not? Now, for instance, just to give you an idea, when you don't reach individuation is the second book I wrote about the Ramayana, because after the Ayodhya event, the rising archetype was Rama, because everybody, wanted to build the new Rama temple and so on. And so at that time, Dr. Karan Singh was the ICCR head, and he said, let's do a Jungian conference here to find out. And they asked me to do the Ramayana. And I sent my paper back to Marie-Louise von Franz, who was Jung's successor at that time. And she said it's a very dysfunctional myth for women, because Rama, in the end, becomes the king and the sons, but there's no woman, because Sita goes back to Mother Earth. So I said, one day I'm going to write this book. And so I made Sita the heroine, because she individuates, but Rama is still listening to what the folk want him. It's the collective unconscious that he keeps talking about being. He doesn't listen to his inner voice or so. And Sita, she tries and tries and tries, and then she doesn't succeed. She says, okay, there's no place for me, and goes back to Mother Earth. So that was the second book I wrote. Came out in 2014, the year our Prime Minister was chosen. Modi. And so I was taken to release the book in Bhutan because they didn't want to bring it at the Jaipur Lit Fest. So the archetype, is a story of behavior pattern. It sort of, each culture has them. That's why the book of Joseph Campbell is so important because he takes different myths and shows the pattern. Each stage is so important to understand because it shows the stages of the archetype. So I think we've finished with our questions. Thank you. Yes?
I wanted to know, how do you practice? How do you bring it, all these theories and whatever you said, into practice? If we see a patient, I'm also a psychologist. So if we see a patient, how will we use this kind of, whatever you talked about? So what is your...
All in the book.
Just give me one example. Like if you have a patient, how will you deal with,
With?
gay? If he is a gay, then how will you deal with all these theories, and what will be the process? Just
But
in nutshell.
we read out just that passage, didn't we, between the two of us? That's how I would start. We usually do it with closed eyes to ask them about their questions because we're dealing with the limbic system.
Okay, is it related to relaxation therapy?
To
Relaxation therapy or relaxation therapy?
relaxation.
Close eyes and ask, and this is also kind of behavioral therapy.
Not necessarily. We mostly deal with dreams, a lot with dreams, and see what's going on in the unconscious. That's our main therapeutic tool. Because dreams tell a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
For collective consciousness in today's world and the situation we're in, is mythology a good way to kind of create that? Can we create a safe space even for communities? Because the minute you go in either way, then there is some resistance and danger to your existence. But can mythology be, like I always think that if it was true dharma, when you say that Sanatani dharma is so incredible, that it is about life, that all these kinds of things, which is very inclusive, which is the core of it, is there a way of possibly telling the stories so that you can affect more minds through mythological storytelling, like choosing those things and making it more popular? Is that a good way? Because the minds are conditioned in that direction today.
Yeah, I actually started with trying to write a film script, but didn't, because today I thought, who reads books? Not many people read. And films reach thousands of people.
But
and can
medium
change.
can be different. It's a story, it's how you tell it. If the medium is animation, for example, because even Amar Chitra Katha could tell you so many stories much more easily. So what I mean is, I think it doesn't, a book is the foundation for it, but the way because you could have it through social media, you could do it so many ways in today's information world. So marrying that mythology with new technology and new information systems to reach larger thing, is that like...
Yeah, but I was trying to do that through film, but I didn't know how to write a film script because I thought many more people will listen to this or understand what we're trying to do through a film. But I didn't know how to write a script. But I've written in the introduction that I hope one person who is a film writer may come up with a script at some time, because I feel a film changes a lot of collective unconscious rather than a book which goes so slow, through people's mind. That was my idea of spreading it in a faster way. I don't know if you agree with me, but films do. Well, I hope somebody finds some tool. Yeah.
I have a kind of a technical question, but it's just something that I've been very curious about. So, since you are a Jungian analyst and you do a lot of dream interpretation, and you've had a lot of homosexual clients, I've always wondered how do they dream of their anima or animus figures? Do they see people of the same sex, or do they see
Both.
both?
I mean, each of us has the male and the female within us. And whoever is the person appearing if it's supposed to be a male, of course it appears as a male, but they also have females coming into their dreams. Because it's that part that needs to come up, which they need to look at.
So the archetype assumes whatever is functionally useful for the person, like for the sake of integration.
Can you hold it a little better?
Yeah, so I'm asking, does the archetype just assume the form which is useful for like integration for the person? It can be male or female, regardless of whether the patient itself is male or female.
Yeah, because even like the Mohini, it's the male and the male, but it's in a female form. So, it's Maya, what you need at that moment, which will come up.
I understand. Thank you.
So I think we're done.
On that note, I'd like to thank Rashna Imhasly-Gandhy and Malini White for bringing today's session to BIC. Thank you to the audience for spending your evening with us. Copies of Courage to Be You are available outside for purchase and author signing. Have a good night.